Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. I first want to say my condolences to the Michael Brown family for their devastating loss. I can't even imagine the heartbreak, the emotional turmoil that they must be suffering. And again, my condolences. An absolute tragedy and a tragic day and a tragic event. The fact that Michael Brown was shot and gunned down by Officer Darren Wilson. But I'll tell you something. Officer Darren Wilson deserves an apology because the grand jury decision, after hours and hours and hours of assessment, all kinds of facts, the actual evidence being looked at in days of deliberations, the verdict is there is no probable cause. Actual DNA evidence, blood, all over the car of the police vehicle Darren Wilson was driving, all over Darren Wilson himself. That is scientific and irrefutable proof. Now, I want you to also keep in mind, this wasn't just the grand jury in the state of Missouri, but also was looked at and interfered with from a federal level. Eric Holder, the outgoing Fast and Furious scumbag, who, by the way, suddenly quit. Isn't that interesting how the rats flee the nest before any of this comes to light? But it had been looked at not just by the president, but one of his cohorts, Eric Holder, Fast and Furious scumbag. And both came to the same conclusion, that Officer Darren Wilson was acting in self-defense, and again, that there was no probable cause to indict the officer. And again, nobody's taking away from the tragedy. Nobody's taking away from this event. And obviously, the intense pain and suffering that many people are feeling right now, and the protesters are feeling, I'm sure, in a lot of respects as well. But I would have to say, you are an idiot if you're still looting in the streets tonight, as I saw dozens of people post the decision, run off into the darkness with their masks on so that they could potentially loot more QTs or more Walmarts, as if that's going to somehow bring Michael Brown back. Again, folks, you might not like it, but this is the actual evidence. And again, we reported on this story extensively here at AMTV, and we've only been proven correct, not just in our assessment of the evidence, but also some of our assumptions, that the eyewitnesses, the ones that you saw on camera, courtesy of the race-baiting propaganda machine that makes up the corporate giant CNN, was full of shit. And the Michael Brown wasn't running away from the officer, but was attacking the officer, who suffered, in several reports, an ocular fracture to the eye, and that was beat up and bruised to the face, as was mentioned tonight with the grand jury decision. Again, Michael Brown, what many people believe to be a thug, not a very good character, who had robbed a liquor store just moments prior to this violent altercation with Darren Wilson. And again, not that that event should be the only thing looked at. The event that was assessed tonight with many days of deliberation and hours and hours and hours of assessment by a grand jury was whether or not Darren Wilson was in the wrong and whether or not he acted in self-defense. And the evidence itself proved that he did. Again, no probable cause to indict Darren Wilson, and Darren Wilson is owed an apology, not just by the Michael Brown family, but the mainstream bullshit media, the people, the looters, the rioters in the streets, those of you burning it down right now, burning down QTs and potentially Walmarts, as was the case several months ago. Darren Wilson, who's been demonized and his life likely destroyed by the mainstream media because of people that just want to jump into old wounds and ignite a race war in this country and rally and rise up events that have nothing to do, again, with the actual evidence and with the actual case itself that made up the tragic death and killing of Michael Brown. Again, a grand jury deciding that there is no probable cause to indict Darren Wilson. Darren Wilson really is owed an apology, and I look forward to hearing his story, who was attacked, according to the grand jury, violently, who was likely fearing for his life and had to act in self-defense as Michael Brown, who knows, intended to maybe kill him with his own bare hands. Took multiple shots. There was a pause between multiple rounds that were fired from Darren Wilson's magazine. Eyewitness accounts say that Michael Brown charged Darren Wilson. Again, images that we saw very graphically in a liquor store just moments before this very, very tragic event. And again, nobody's taking away from the tragedy. Nobody's taking away from the death. It's a very sorry state of affairs. But Darren Wilson clearly owed an apology by the general public, by CNN, by the race baiters, by Anderson Cooper, etc., because it only proves our point. Darren Wilson actually on a call for a 2-month-old who had trouble breathing moments before he was unfortunately put into the altercation with Michael Brown, where he was very likely fearing for his life. This whole Michael Brown media circus is not about Michael Brown. What it's really about and what it's really highlighted and illustrated is the police state and militarization of our police force, these robo-cops of sorts. There are legitimate cases, of course, where police officers are in the wrong. They're strong-arming people, victims, whether or not they happen to be black, white, purple, green, or polka dot. Many cases suggest this. But again, may I emphasize, a grand jury has decided no probable cause after looking at mountains of evidence, scientific proof. Let's look at the evidence. Let's look at the scientific proof, Let's see what that has to say. Well, overwhelmingly, it supports Darren Wilson, not the other way around. And Darren Wilson here, really, folks, has been the victim. Again, his life destroyed by the mainstream media, by CNN, destroyed in the eyes, reviled in the eyes of public opinion, and I'm sure was not only fearing for his life on that day when he had to protect himself in self-defense, but is still fearing for his life. And that is an utter shame. It says something about the degradation of our society, the joke that makes up the media machine, the media circus itself, our country at large, and also should make you ask questions about why was this story blown up in the first place. Again, Darren Wilson, folks, in my opinion, deserves an apology. From any of you who doubted him, for any of you who demonized him, for any of you who jumped to conclusions. And we're not in the business on this channel, at TV, our alternative media network. We're not in the business of jumping to conclusions. We're in the business of looking at facts, hardcore freaking facts. And the facts show, prove, and back up everything we've reported on from the very beginning. That, my friends, is integrity. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.